Welcome, Jeff Klein. Please take it away.
Thank you. I didn't learn that I was up this week until yesterday, so
Uh,
I didn't have as much time to prepare, and my comments may be a little more disorganized than if I had had more advance notice. But anyway, so as we all know, the genocide in Gaza is continuing and deepening, and I'll get back to that in a little bit later. But the most dramatic story of the week is certainly Israel's attack on Doha and Qatar and its attempt to assassinate the Hamas leadership, civilian leadership, including the ones who were engaged in negotiations three-way with the United States, Qatar, and sometimes with Israel to find a way to agree to a ceasefire. And there's a number of things we could, highlight about this. Of course, an attack on a foreign country that's not in a state of war and an assassination of the civilian leadership, political leadership of an organization is contrary to all the supposed norms of international law and behavior. And one way or another, nearly every country has condemned this to one extent or another, as they should. But it also, points out a number of issues and contradictions in terms of U.S. and Israeli policy in the Middle East. The U.S. had been trying to negotiate an enduring ceasefire and release of the hostages, prisoners in Gaza, and had been making progress. Basically, Hamas had agreed to most of the terms, and it was a matter of working out the details. And Israel's response was to kill the Hamas negotiators, or try to kill them. And I should point out, though, it's true that most of the world condemns this, sometimes hypocritically. Israeli society was pretty united behind this, including Netanyahu's political opposition within Israel. And his calculation was this would be a show of strength that would gain him support in Israel, and he was probably right. It's also true that Israel has had a policy of political assassinations since its very foundation, or even before. And this is part of that pattern. I mean, just last week, besides the attack on Qatar, Israel bombed Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and probably some of the ships in the flotilla that's supposed to be breaking through the Gaza blockade. But even many decades ago, a political assassination was Israeli policy. In 1944, they assassinated the British High Commissioner in the Middle East, Lord Moyne. In 1948, they assassinated Count Bernadotte, who had been appointed by the UN to oversee a more just transition and the return of Palestinian refugees. And, you could go on and on. And more recently, of course, they assassinated political figures, Iranian political figures in Syria, a Hamas leader in Tehran, and last week, basically killed the entire civil government of Yemen, not the military leadership, but the governing ministers in Yemen. So this is a pattern that Israel has used as part of its policy since its existence. And in this case, it's just a clear demonstration that Israel is fearful of a political settlement that will end the war in Gaza, and is doing, in this case, a very drastic effort to stop that, but has been opposing any move toward an end to the massacres and political settlement since the beginning of its attack on Gaza. And when there was an actual ceasefire that was agreed formally last spring, late winter, Israel unilaterally broke it in March and instituted a stricter blockade of food and materials into Gaza. During the negotiations before that and since, every time Hamas seems to be close to agreeing, Israel, usually with the support of the U.S., will move the goalposts to make it impossible for there to be an agreement. And that's been the pattern all along. Because Israel has no interest in ending its genocide in Gaza. Its main purpose is to finish it. And finishing it means, at minimum, from the Israeli point of view, the total destruction of the physical infrastructure of Gaza and housing, and the forcible removal of the population of Gaza into a very restricted area under Israeli control in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, with the sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken hope that the people in Gaza will be so immiserated that they will demand to be let out and somehow will leave, and that Israel will return and recolonize Gaza. This is Israel's actual war aim. And of course, it's being illustrated now by what they're doing in attacking the last surviving built-up area within Gaza, that is Gaza City and its surroundings, which is in the north central part of Gaza. And it claims this is a military campaign, but in fact, it's a campaign of destruction. And Israel is every day proudly shows pictures of it blowing up apartment buildings in Gaza. And this is an effort to make it uninhabitable and force the people to move into what is more or less a concentration camp in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. This is their aim, and they have not flinched from this aim, despite different, fake interests in peace. They have not deviated from this aim during the whole course of the 2 years of war against the people of Gaza. And of course, as even Jewish people in Israel understand, rescuing the prisoners who are still alive in Gaza is very secondary to Israel's war aims, and they are quite prepared to sacrifice and use that sacrifice as a political leverage in order to carry out their final destruction, final solution of Gaza. Now, all of this is so vivid that it's creating a lot of problems for Israel's ostensible allies, including the U.S. And I might point out, there's always been, for a long time, there's been a debate in people who observe the Middle East as to whether U.S. policy in Israel toward the Middle East is primarily a prisoner of Israel and support for Israel, or if U.S. imperial policy in the Middle East sees Israel as a tool to help it extend its imperial rule in the Middle East. And in fact, increasingly, those two aims are contradictory. A little bit of the background, Qatar, like other Gulf countries, is an ally of the U.S. Of course, none of them are democracies. All of the U.S. Allies in the Middle East are very far from democracies, the Gulf states, Jordan, Egypt. But Qatar is the site of the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, a huge air base. It's the local headquarters of CENTCOM, the Central Command, whose formal headquarters is actually in Tampa, Florida. And Qatar has been considered, a key ally of the U.S. in its sort of military footprint in the Middle East. And Israel's actions have created a lot of disturbances in that. Israel's allies, and not only Qatar, but the Gulf monarch dictatorships, are now wondering, the deal was the U.S. would make them safe if they played ball with the U.S. And of course, Israel is making them unsafe, increasingly unsafe. And the hostility of their populations is toward Israel is threatening to the existing regimes. So there's a kind of contradiction. Israel is an ally of the U.S., and the U.S. has been supporting Israel without conditions for so long. But this creates problems for the U.S. in the Middle East, which is possibly the only good thing that can come out of this, because, of course, the U.S. footprint in the Middle East is not in the interest of the people there or the people in this country, and the increasing contradiction of trying to maintain that while being subservient and supportive to Israel is a dilemma that may move things in a better direction, move us out of the Middle East to a certain degree. So all of this that's going on now creates a lot of problems throughout the world. I mean, much of the world, especially outside of Europe and the Anglo-American sphere, is already clearly hostile to what Israel is doing, understands that it's genocide and a continuation of the colonial massacres that many of these countries endured before their independence or during their fight for independence. But now even it's creating political problems for the European countries and America. And they are struggling, especially the Europeans, to respond somehow to the mass disgust of their own populations, but in a way that doesn't really threaten fundamentally their alliance with Israel. So they're looking for sort of symbolic gestures that they can take. So many of the European countries are pledged now at the UN General Assembly this month to formally recognize the state of Palestine, which is purely symbolic at this point because there is no state of Palestine and there's no prospect of a state of Palestine. But they are also at least toying with the idea of some economic sanctions against Israel. And a number of countries, and maybe eventually the entire European Union, is going to refuse the entry of the most radical members of Netanyahu's government, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who probably have no plans to go to Europe anyway. But again, these are gestures that don't have, dramatic consequence of pressuring Israel, but are attempting to placate the anger and mobilization of their own populations. And that's happening, of course, in the U.S. too. Now, most Democrats have been speaking up against the starvation in Gaza. Of course, they, for the most part, don't then threaten to do anything about it. But it's commonplace now for Democrats to wring their hands over this. And of course, the only serious effort, a political effort in Congress, is the Block the Bombs bill, which now has 44 members. We'll get to that later. But what's interesting and possibly a sign of change is that now among those sponsors are a number of members of Congress who formerly were considered moderates and centrists. Some of them even had AIPAC support in their election campaigns. And so, we may be on the cusp of a kind of large-scale stampede in the direction of putting some limitations on U.S. military support for Israel. And that's going on in the Republican Party, too. At least some very prominent Republican commentators are now raising the issue of why should the U.S. be funding Israel. And that includes Steve Bannon, for example, who was Trump's campaign brain and ideological brain. So, we're at a place where, things can begin to change and as happens in politics and other things, slowly, and then all of a sudden. People are watching, for instance, in New York, the campaign and the popularity of Zohran Mamdani. And the latest polls indicate that among New Yorkers, a decisive majority of voters is more sympathetic to Palestine than to Israel. And among young Democrats, it's overwhelming, almost unanimous. And other polls show that Democrats are overwhelmingly in favor of limiting or stopping U.S. military aid to Israel. So eventually, we're going to reach the point where, the dam may break, and we can only hope for that day as soon as possible. But, the trend is in a better direction, I would say. So otherwise, the defense against this movement, as we all know, is to label it as anti-Semitic and confuse hostility to what Israel is doing to hatred of Jews. and that's happening in Massachusetts at our anti-Semitism commission, which met, for the umpteenth time earlier this week, and it was very interesting. I watched some of it, and among a whole number of sort of pre-arranged pro-Israel testifiers who, went on and on how, to conflate Israel and Jewishness. There was a panel of 3 Jewish academics who used social science to say, that this so-called crisis of anti-Semitism is overblown. And yes, there's an issue there has been and there is today, but that this idea of a crisis, especially at the universities, is overblown. And they were questioned in a very hostile manner by the members of the commission, as though they were, representing the Ku Klux Klan rather than Jewish social scientists. So it was interesting to observe that. And finally, 2 small but very telling anecdotes. Somehow, the Los Angeles Holocaust Museum posted a graphic meme that with the title "Never Again" can't mean only Jews, which is, pretty benign, right? Who doesn't believe that? Well, they met a firestorm of response to that from the pro-Israel community, and were forced to remove that posting and apologize for it. So, and the other thing, that has historical resonance is that there was recently an expose that among the armed guards that are shooting and humiliating people at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, so-called humanitarian aid sites, includes a substantial element of neo-crusader biker gang members who are there, overtly to restart the Crusades and defeat the Muslims, and that's a sign of who is supporting Israel these days fervently among the non-Jewish Zionists. So I'll stop there. There's probably a lot I'm leaving out, but happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thanks, Jeff. Please raise your virtual hand if you have a comment or question. Zarina.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. That was really helpful. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. I'm still trying to figure out where Israel's thinking comes from. I think, the strategy of ethnic cleansing and apartheid is a strategy used by other countries, other white countries. But there's also a different strategy, I think maybe related to, excuse me, I had to fix my chair, but fix it in a moment, due to programs. What do you think? And also I have 2 other points. None of the you mentioned that Israel is a democracy. I disagree. I mean, I know they have elections, but it's an apartheid democracy, so it's only for the white.
I don't think I said that. I certainly don't
You said
believe it.
democracy. You did. You did. It was the only democracy in the area, you said. But if that's the case, then Palestinians have a democracy because they have an elected government too. So I just want to clarify that. And third thing is, there's a lot of Israel favoritism in our community. I see signs with temples on the street and all sorts of things. There's a lot of Zionist privilege here, and I feel that they're taking it out of control over and over here and maybe everywhere, and that's part of the problems why the problems keep repeating. That's my say, but could you comment on any of that?
So I don't believe, and I don't think I said that Israel is a democracy. It's somewhat of a democracy for the Jewish citizens of Israel, just as apartheid South Africa was a democracy for the white citizens of South Africa. But of course, it can't be called a democracy when it rules half of its population without equality or political rights. So I don't characterize Israel as a democracy. What I did say was that none of the other countries in the Middle East are democracies either. And these are, the U.S. supports and is allied with many of them. And that's true, and including Israel. So I can't remember the rest of what you were asking, but maybe Susan has something to say.
Yeah, the second part was this programs? Is there a strategy coming from their programs, history of past abuse of the Israel in different countries, or do you think it's a typical
So what's becoming
pattern?
clear, I think, is that Israel is not just a threat to the Palestinians that live under its control, but is effectively a threat to the entire world, especially the Middle East, but the entire world. It is, by allowing it, it is undermining any pretense of an international system of law and equality. And this is very dangerous. I mean, not just for the Arabs that it's killing, but dangerous for the whole world. And an example of this, you know, the hypocrisy, if you look at the way the US and its European allies talk about what the Russians are doing in Ukraine, the language that they use about that, compare that to the language that they use about Israel, it's stunning. You know, of course, whatever you think about what the Russians are doing in Ukraine, they are not committing genocide in the way that Israel is doing. There's no Ukrainian city that has been obliterated like Gaza has, and yet no one hesitates to talk about war crimes in Ukraine, Russia, and international law. When it comes to Israel, it's much, much more muted if there's any criticism at all. And this is, you know, undermines any hope of an international system based on law and human rights. So,
Great, thanks.
sorry to go on. Did I leave something out? Serena, did you have another question?
I think, well, there's a little bit of white Jewish privilege in this country, at least maybe in Massachusetts. I don't know if it's in other states, but okay. I know Abby wants me to keep rolling or something, but I'm sorry, but I have questions. If you don't have questions, then that's it. Jeff, what do you think about that?
Well, the pro-Israel, you know, interests that are led principally by Jewish Americans are very powerful in our political system. I think it's safe to say that, and you know, that's another, to get into it in detail historically is another discussion, which I don't think is, you know, very pertinent here, but it is something to discuss, but not, I don't think we have time to do it today.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Susan. You're muted, Susan.
Really excellent summary, Jeff. Really, really top notch. Thank you so much for it. I came in about 4 or 5 minutes late, so I don't know if you mentioned the recent J Street statement.
Yes, I didn't mention it. But,
good.
go
Okay.
ahead.
That's part of what I think we might be on the cusp of a stampede, given the kind of statement that came out of J Street just a few days ago.
So J Street, for those of you who know, J Street is the more sort of liberal Zionist lobby organization that is at war with AIPAC, or AIPAC is at war with it, basically. And J Street earlier this week or last week came out with a statement supporting the idea of holding back some U.S. arms for Israel. And the importance of this, whatever you think about JPAC or liberal Zionism, is that politically it gives a cover for Democrats to move in that direction, who are nervous, nervous of being called anti-Semites and everything. So
Exactly.
It's a positive development to me. You know, we're not on the same page with J Street, but sometimes we can make some distinctions there. And they, you know, this statement supporting withholding military aid to Israel is positive.
Right. Basically, they called for new, stricter limits on offensive arms to Israel as it continues to pursue endless war and occupation. No more blank checks, no more military support for the war in Gaza, and no support ever for annexation. I would love to see this translate into support for HR 3565. We should watch to see if that happens.
I would just jump in and say,
tipping point on that sometime soon.
yeah, I would just jump in to say if they wanted to support 3565, they would have said so. The implication to me is they're planning a different bill with different criteria, but we shall see.
Let's watch it.
Beth?
Yeah, is Jeff, is there a response from the Qatari government to the assassination attempt on
Yes.
Hamas political leadership? And I wondered if there was a meaningful response from any of the Gulf countries. And thirdly, I just want to know, where will future negotiations take place, or are they indefinitely derailed?
Well, the Qataris, of course, expressed outrage, as did many countries, but what will go beyond words is not so clear. The Qataris have said that they don't see any way of carrying forward the negotiations that they have been mediating for, because Israel is trying to kill the negotiators on the other side. You can't negotiate under those circumstances. And by the way, I should have mentioned something that is, potentially worrisome to Israel is that Trump, the first reports were that the Trump administration had green lighted this attack on Qatar. And, for all we know, that may be true, but Trump's vocal response and the White House vocal response since then was to disassociate itself with this attack and even criticize it to a certain degree. And, if they're losing Trump, that's a pretty serious thing. And we don't know how far that will go, but at least rhetorically, the Trump administration said they're opposed to this. They're opposed to anything like this in the future. And they claim they tried to warn Qatar. They were notified. They do admit through military sources, they were notified that this attack was coming, as you would think they would, because, there's U.S. air base, a huge U.S. air base in Qatar. But Trump said they tried to warn the Qataris. The Qataris say it was after the attack had already happened when they heard about it. So, but still, it's a sign that Israel is making sort of U.S. policy in the Middle East somewhat discomforted. And again, what I said, this contradiction that, we can support Israel all the way or have our sort of imperial dominance in the Middle East, but maybe not both. And that's potentially a good thing.
Thanks. I do want to get to some business, but we have Paul and Nadia. So Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, it seems to me that it would be very serious if the United States was in collaboration with Israel. A number of the writers that I read last night felt that was pretty clear that was the case, that just as Trump had sucked the Iranians into negotiations thinking that no attack was imminent, and then Israel wipes all the leadership out and all the nuclear scientists, while Iran is thinking that there's negotiations going on. And here you have another peace agreement, peace efforts supposedly pushed by the United States to suck the Hamas leadership into being exposed to an Israeli attack. I think it's I think there's a good solid case that can be made that Trump and Israel collaborated on this, and I think it changes if that were true, I think that changes the evaluation of the situation.
Yeah, trying to read Trump's mind is a challenging thing. I'm just reporting what they're saying. That's all we can know for sure. And what they're saying is they didn't support this, and who knows what they really did.
Okay, thanks, Nadia. And Nadia has an item in the chat. Nadia, your relatives are on the flotilla.
Yeah,
is that what
so
you're saying?
I have. First, I just want you to know I couldn't change my my name on there. So this is Rafiq Lopez.
Hello.
He is the cousin, my nephew and cousin of our boys, our young men that are on the flotilla. So I have two maritime qualified people who were recruited to do this, and they were very glad to go, and I was not glad, but because I believe that what you're doing is more in line with the importance of blocking the money flow for this, and that's what's actually going to change things. So just to get directly to what Jeff was talking about and what other people were talking about in terms of a change of environment, what we're seeing here on Capitol Hill is even from yesterday to today. So we went to a lot of the same offices yesterday and then today. So there were two fire bombings, right? One was last night, and then another one was in the last few hours. So so now there's been three fire bombings of the flotilla outside Tunis. And so it's impossible to accept the lies. I mean, the first time, after the first firebombing, they said, and this is to the point of, can people still be on board with Israel? Well, if you're saying that it's cigarettes that landed on a pile of life jackets, no, well, they're dropping the drone copter is dropping the incendiary device right onto the hold where the life jackets are. So this is the third time that they did this exact procedure. And the thing is, so they did 3 of those, and they also said these flotillas are Hamas. Okay, but the intelligence, personnel were in the trainings. So I was also in Barcelona in the trainings as a person who was helping load the boats and inventory the boats. And I was doing that to spend more time with my kids, one of whom is a sailing captain of one boat, the other whom is an engineer on a different boat on a motorized yacht. So the thing is that the organizers were saying openly in the meeting, we know you're here. We know Israel intelligence that you're here, and you're welcome, because we want you to know who we are, and we want you to know that we're peaceful. We want you to know everything about our training, that we have gone over and over these procedures, that we have nonviolent training, that we have no weapons at all on board, that we've modified the knife situation so they're just very, we've like taken extra precautions to have no weapons at all on board. So we saw the people in the jet skis going around with the black masks on their face, and those people were investigating the boats, and then we saw the drones going around the boats and investigating. So for them to say to the press that these people are Hamas, when they have every information that could possibly be known about the flotilla, and they know. So, and we could see it in the offices today, that these lies keep coming out, and the offices are getting real information from the 30 Americans that are on these boats. And they were all aware of their constituents. So you guys were focusing on the mass delegation, and I hope that I could be in touch with you to get help, because even in the next few days, it's kind of a time-sensitive issue. They're just leaving Tunis. They're going from the port of Tunis to a different port in Tunisia this evening, and then they'll be going on towards Gaza after that. So anyway, thank you so much for letting me tell you that information.
Yeah, just one quick point. I saw in the question, someone asked, isn't the CENTCOM headquarters in Qatar? The Middle East regional headquarters is there, but the official headquarters of CENTCOM is in Tampa, Florida. So
thank you, Nadia. And if everyone could contact their representatives and advocate for that the representatives should take action to ensure the safety of the flotilla. That's very important at this point. That flotilla is headed for Gaza. Israel is pretty clearly going to attack it, as it has attacked previous flotillas. It's an extremely dangerous situation. And this is something we should advocate on.
And Israel is certainly not above using extreme violence if they think it's appropriate to stop this flotilla. I can't remember what year it was, but quite a while ago, there was a large flotilla from Turkey, and Israeli commandos attacked the largest ship, the Mavi Marmara, and killed
I think it was 9 people, maybe in 2009.
One of whom was an American citizen, and of course, the U.S. government gave for us,
And Nadia, you also mentioned you saw the press conference today. Could you share about that? I know Ayanna Pressley was involved in. Did she lead, or what was her role in that press conference?
I'm going to actually let Rafiq share. I was there, but he also filmed and maybe was more aware of all of the names of the different celebrities and everything that were there.
Yeah, so Ayanna Pressley, I think she was maybe 3rd or 4th in the press conference. We heard from AOC came out, Mahmoud Khalil came out, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and I think Delia.
Delia Ramirez is the sponsor, and so definitely she was facilitating the whole press conference.
Yeah, there may have been a few others. I don't know their names personally, but I have video footage and photographs of them. So, I mean, if it's possible, I can send this to you guys. But it was good. Everybody was out there. It was
Pouring rain. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were just standing there and they were just talking about, oh, there was a doctor who was on site. He was talking about having to do amputations and all of these things with very little resources, obviously. But it seemed like apparently 44 Congress people have already signed on to this block the bombs bill. So, God willing, it goes through and, yeah, we end aid to Israel.
Yeah, and Cynthia Nixon spoke, and then another person who maybe you can identify, who didn't say his name. I think he expected us all just to know who he was, but anyway, he's a celebrity, so yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the video is there. I'm not sure it's the whole video because that video starts with Diana, and that's why I was wondering if she was the first speaker at the press conference or no. But anyway, I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing.
National Peace Action is having a Zoom meeting with the sponsor of the Block the Bombs things on Monday.
Right.
Maybe someone could put the link to that in the chat.
Good idea.
if you want to
But
attend.
Block the Bombs is our biggest ask right now, even though this bill started kind of slow. It was filed in early June, but in August it got a lot of new co-sponsors. Even in September, it's gotten like 5 or 6 more co-sponsors already. And yet in Massachusetts, it's up to something like 45. And yet in Massachusetts, we still only have the 2, Presley and McGovern. So the other 7 have not gotten on yet, and they are definitely vulnerable to our pressure. They really should be on this. And also, the 2 senators have not responded to our request that they file a Senate counterpart. So that needs to happen as well. Okay, quickly as we can. Noble.
Yes, Nadia, quickly, you mentioned how many Americans were taking part in the flotilla. How many roughly are?
There are 30 Americans taking part on the flotilla. They're on 23 different boats.
I think it's useful to bring to our reps that, hey, Americans are on these ships. Please do something to defend them or protect them.
We've been going directly to those offices with Code Pink and naming the constituents that are on the boats for each office. They seem to actually be already aware. Most of the offices are already aware that their persons are on the boats. But I think any support in that regard, I'm going to post the letter that we want each office to sign in the chat.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Nadia. Susan, last question.
Any people from Massachusetts?
Yeah. Yes, I think maybe like 9 people or something around there.
No. I think it's just our 2 from Massachusetts.
Really? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's just our 2 boys from Massachusetts.
Okay. Can you put their names in the chat?
Yeah. I'll try to. Oh, Rafiq maybe will help me. I'm not actually sure. Maybe there are other people, but we do have the list, and so he's gonna help with that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so let's shift onto some business. Give me 1 second here. Okay, I have to switch the recording.